Yeah, we'll get started here shortly. Has anybody, Ryan, you're not part of this, but has anybody like actually tried to get a haircut or do the self haircut?
Letting my hair
All
go.
the time, bro. What's up?
I'm actually reminiscing of the 60s again. So.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, look at this, man. Like, this is crazy.
Oh my God, Derek, you're a hippie.
I know. I was supposed to get a haircut like right before the lockdown, right? And I'd put it off, and I'm like, oh, geez. So we'll see.
Well, get the kids to go at you with the scissors.
Yeah, we'll have a contest. Like, here, you get a lighter, you get scissors, you get clippers.
Here, I could lend you this for a sec.
Yeah.
That's what I do in my spare time. Is I play with the sword.
Just don't fall on it.
Is that the cleaver from Braveheart there? Holy cow.
That's actually a bastard sword, so you can use both hands, one or two hands.
It's called a bastard sword. You can use both hands. Those like masturbating.
Well, there's bastards and there's rapiers as well, so you know.
Exactly.
He's got that bastard wit.
No kidding. Rob, what's going on in New York? Are you in New York?
Everything, yes, everything. We're hanging in there. We're hanging in.
Epicenter. You're the epicenter always. Doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah, of course. Blame New York. My new bumper sticker is going to be Blame New York.
And so what I wanted to talk about today, and we got some smart people on here, not that we don't usually have smart people, but I wanted to talk a bit about, like, everybody's going like, how do I manage the current situation? But for me, I'm trying to figure out, okay, once we get beyond this situation, because, I'm trying to be positive about it, is, what are you planning to do? What are you planning for to make sure that you are, getting the momentum back and you have a plan in place to kind of get back to normalcy, and if anything, try to catch up on lost time. I mean, it was interesting. Like, I'm not a medical person, but just watching all these stories about people being put on respirators, and the whole point of the respirator is essentially keep the body alive so it can fight off the virus. But I had heard about some people being on 2 weeks of being intubated and put in a coma essentially so that their body can survive this. And I'm like, well, that's kind of like what all of us, we're all on respirators right now. We're all on ventilators. So once you get off the ventilator, so to speak, what are you going to do? What are some of the things that you're going to do? Or is there anything you can do now to make sure that you're positioned? And I had a long talk with Rob Panarello about this, and how do we flip this so that we can turn it into our favor, even though it is a very dire time? So I'll let Rob start, and then I want to get everybody's opinion on things that they're doing now to kind of position themselves, or even just to survive now so that you can be in a position to do something. Rob? Yeah,
I mean, I just think you have to prepare now for when the opportunity presents itself, so to speak. So, from a healthcare side, I've been in touch with hospital administrators when hospitals think they're going to begin elective surgeries again, because that's our business with regards to outpatient physical therapy, non-op and post-op patients. I've spoken to physicians when they anticipate elective surgery to begin again. My daughter's a physician's assistant at a specialty hospital in New York City. She has been told, and the physicians I've been speaking to, is once the opportunity arises, that the ORs are going to be open 7 days a week, and the doctors are going to be working voluntarily, probably 6-7 days a week, for the rebound of the patients they've lost, as well as to get their share of the current patients that are going to need care. I think other industries are going to be the same way. I think if you look at some of our facilities are in a high-end health club that has both a high-end and a low-end, if you want to use those terms, type health clubs. And they feel that as long as they can survive based on the smaller gyms just probably like the smaller physical therapy practices or the smaller hardware stores with regards to Home Depot and that type of scenario. The people who survive, where are all these people in the population going to go to when the facility or the entity they used to want to go to is non-existent? And so you have to wait for that rebound of that population. And in this case, in these gyms, they think their membership is going to increase, at the time of this opportunity. So I think you have to get your information of accuracy, or as accurate as you can be. When is this rebound going to occur, right? When are we going to peak? When is the flattening of the curve going to occur in your area? And when is business operations potentially going to open? And then be aware and be ready to go. And if it's necessary to get your share of the pie, so to speak, by being open 7 days a week, so be it. That's what you'll need to do to make up for the deficit you're going through now. But I think right now you have to plan how you're going to strategize with regards to when this opportunity exists, this is how I'm going to attack it. And if you need to establish things, whether it's, based, I would assume most of the people on this forum are coaches, et cetera, then is it videos you're going to have? Is it, your coaches and your programs are going to be in place? Is your facility going to be clean and open? Has your utility bills been kept up to date so you don't have to wait for something to be turned on before you can get into operation? All those things what you need to plan now so that day one, the opportunity exists, you open the door and move forward. The other thing I think you take from this scenario is if you have been doing videos or telehealth or telecommunication with regards to online entities, that may be another product line that you keep. And maybe some people who are still gun shy or athletes who may be gun shy, let's say they've pretty belligerent parents saying you're not going back to that university or institution for another month because I don't trust that you're not going to get the virus. Well, then you're still going to have those capacities to either financially use another product line for income of your business or as a venue to train your athletes. But all those things have to be planned and worked out now for the day that your opportunity to restore your business or your training occurs.
That's a good point. That whole contingency planning thing where if you just assume that you're going to return to business as usual, that's probably not a very good way to approach it. You have to look at, okay, we're coming back full tilt, we're coming back partially, we're coming back with some degree of distance health or telehealth. We're having all these problems. Are those some of the conversations you're having now? Just this contingency
Absolutely. And it's essentially, I'll tell you one thing we're doing with regards to physical therapy. I mean, a lot of these patients, whether they've been intubated or not, a lot of these patients are going to be weakened. A lot of these patients coming out, from hospitals are going to need either physical rehabilitation or conditioning in the gym setting or whatever it may be. So, our business is primarily sports medicine and orthopedics. We're looking at another product line looking to recruit business from pulmonologists and that general practitioners and that type of an entity is a product line. So that's a separate product line that's going to occur coming out of this business. The telehealth is going to be a separate product line coming out of this crisis. And so, though we're in a crisis, there's always opportunity, as sad as that is to say, always coming out of a crisis that's going to, be beneficial to you, whether it's, we've talked about this before. I've mentioned, I really think the silver lining in this is that we all come out of this being better than we were before because, we have to reach down and to go into certain uncomfortable situations that we're not used to being in. And we will. And we all will get out of this. I'm confident of that.
Yep. Thanks for that, Rob. I think that was a good point. I saw somebody, they showed that they were intubated for like a couple of weeks and on the ventilator, they brought them off. And then the doctor essentially said, it's going to be like a 6 to 12 month recovery for this person. And I'm like, wow, like in terms of bringing them back, all those physical qualities. So I didn't really think of that. And what, I'm not going to say it's a burden on the system, but certainly, like you said, it's an opportunity.
Well, the problem, what's happening here is that the virus, as everybody knows, is very contagious, right? So now you get this thing, and the reason why you have problems or the reason why there's passings of individuals is that it truly affects the lungs, right? And that's the problem. So you have to get on a ventilator if you're in that percentage of the population that needs to be on a ventilator. But this isn't like influenza or another type of virus where you may be on a ventilator for 1 or 2 days. You can be on a ventilator 7 to 14 days or wherever it may be. Thus, there is not a turnover of ventilators. There's not a turnover of beds at the hospitals. The reason why that regular hospitals are becoming coronavirus entities is because the ICUs are being overflown because the beds in the ICUs aren't being turned over. So as these mass people are coming in with signs and symptoms, how do you address them? So you have to spread out the availability of hospital beds, ventilators, this, that, the other. That's the problem, because you don't have the expedient, if you want to use that word, turnover that you usually do for ventilators, beds, etc. And so this thing is contagious, it's spreading, but the turnover is slower to the people who are already being treated. And that's the backup.
Yeah. Nikos, you had your hand up there. You want to add something?
Yeah, two things. One thing, Rob, you mentioned about having a contingency plan. Now, what if I threw out this with regards to a lot of people? Like, for instance, if you get on Amazon right now, you can't even buy a rowing machine. They're all sold out. Now, people are going to have their own gyms inside their houses. They're going to have their facilities to train within their houses. And they might get used to that. So then how would you be able to bring those people back into, let's say, the gyms, the facilities that were in place prior to the COVID?
Well, I think that people are going to just want to get out, right? So let's just say, over a 3-month period, there was 100,000 people that needed surgery. I don't think that 100,000 people who need elective surgery or are injured are just going to come running back to the hospitals and say, now I have now I'm going to have my surgery. You're going to have a percentage of a rebound effect. When you're in your house working out for 2 or 3 months, I think you're going to want a change of atmosphere. I think restaurants that have, and I'm not telling you I'm right, I'm just telling you what my perception is, right? And I think restaurants, if you have a 30-table restaurant, they're going to have 20 tables in their restaurant so that they're more spread out, right? The social distancing would make people more comfortable to attend the restaurant. So though the volume of dishes served may be down, but the business is open again, and there are going to be people out there that say, God, I haven't been to a restaurant in so long, I'm going to go back to my favorite restaurant. I want to go to the movies. I haven't been to the movies or a Broadway play in so long, I want to go there, or a sporting event, or those types of things. And then there are going to be obviously the population that are going to say, look, I've made this investment. I'm just going to work out at my own gym. I'm not comfortable yet going out in public. I want to wait a little longer, et cetera. So the rebound effect to me is not going to be 100% of what was missing. I just think it's going to be a significant percentage, and anybody could determine what significant is, 25%, 50%, whatever. But I think that business, as well as business as usual, will be there. I do.
Yeah, but I mean, when we had 9/11, the world changed, in the sense that people were more cautious. The airports changed a lot because there was more, how do you say, screening processes. And I mean, we never went back to prior 9/11. Now we've got this COVID thing. Do you think that we're going to go back to anything prior to the COVID? I mean, I think the world has changed in the way where people are going to be more, how do you say, there's going to be fear, obviously, with regards to relating to other people, but they're going to be more cautious with regards to how they're going to be related to people. Because, I mean, the bottom line too is we also got to realize that even though the numbers will start coming down from what we're seeing in the population with regards to COVID-19, it's still in the environment. It'll still be there.
Yeah.
And how are you going to realize that now I'm going to go to Rob Panarello, who didn't get affected the first time, But how do I know that he doesn't have it right now? Because the biggest problem they're having with this thing is it's asymptomatic while you're still able to give it to somebody.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a couple things. One is what's different here is that the type of virus it is very contagious. But if you want to go back to what you stated, so I literally have been through 9/11. Being in New York, I literally been through the catastrophe of 2008, 2009. We've all been through the swine flu, which has 80 million affected worldwide at that time, and millions died. And we never went through anything like this with the swine flu, and now we're all going through this. I think, unfortunately, there's going to be an entity where people are going to have to go out because people are going to have to work to be able to sustain or stabilize their finances. Now, whether they perform elective type social events is going to be up to the individual, and some will. I mean, you still have people in New York that are gathering in crowds, which makes no sense to me, but it's happening. You're always going to have, Coach has a picture of these people at the beach in Australia and things like that. So I just think you're going to have that bell-shaped curve, right? You're going to have the people that think it's going to be fine. I'm going back to business as usual. I'm not afraid of anything. I'm young, I'm strong. I think you're going to have a little bit of an elderly population that will never go on a cruise again for the rest of their life because they think it's a petri dish, and everything else in between. But there's going to be a point in time, like these other events, that we're going to get back to normalcy. And I think really the exclamation point on the end of the sentence is going to be when we finally get a vaccine, and we don't know when that's going to occur, right? Hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah, certainly. Just like the airline industry, I think there has to be some visible measures. So like, I'll get Ken Vick to jump on next, but if you own a gym or a physical therapy clinic, like, you have to overtly show them that you're cleaning and you're taking these measures, and that's how you're going to separate yourself, rather than just letting people decide, like, oh, should I take a flight even though there's no screening? So Ken, I wanted you to jump in knowing that you have that experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now for us as a business, we have our velocity centers nationwide. We have stuff that's impacted by the high performance side and our Olympic athletes around the world. But business, we're trying to ask that question, like, right, what's going to change? So I think I would agree with both of you guys. I mean, there's some stuff, there's going to be demand that's there. I think a little bit, we're sitting on the side of the thing that's making some of our businesses survive right now. The thing that people are going to want most is community and connection. So our centers that are doing well, that have been closed down but are doing stuff, have community. They have good connection with their athletes. They've built that over time. They didn't just start doing it now. So they're doing okay now. And that's probably the thing most people are missing the most. So I do think as there's opening up of opportunity, there's going to be a lot of people that rush back in that want that. Okay, so that's a big piece. But there's going to be change on how people are probably looking at and doing some things. I mean, we were already seeing trends, not so much our type of place or small studios, but look, the trends of Peloton were already occurring. Health clubs were already experiencing this. This has accelerated it. I don't think it will be the same. We are going to have to do better at connecting in different ways, creating community in different ways that's not just in person, which, I mean, it's really hard from the art and science side. The art part of our industry is all about what they're doing live with people. So there's a whole new skill set to learn. There's new tech tools to use. We think it's going to change a lot of stuff. So I don't know what that means, but community is something that's showing up. And then kind of the idea about how do we as a business, and this is our high performance side as well, but are we all doing a good enough job making our athletes self-sufficient, right? Like, we are in a business, we want to provide a service, but as performance coaches, as just coaches of people, we should be making them self-sufficient in a way. How do we balance that, or how do we do more of that in a way that we can connect with them, not just when they're in our gym, but how can we help guide them in bigger ways? The last one I'll just throw out there that we're talking about business-wide is we're seeing people need, it's reminding our facility owners and our coaches that people need more than workouts. I can go here and find a million workouts to do today, right? Like, we're all sick of seeing this on social media. The thing people are missing though is guidance, nutrition, relaxation, mind, but a bigger coaching. And coaching's been missing in a lot of the fitness industry. So I think that's going to accelerate. We don't have answers. We're playing around with it, but I can tell you it's really reinforcing those people that have good relationships and community are doing better right now.
Yeah, and are you having kind of ongoing discussions with your staff and facility operators on all of this? Like, is this something you're kind of using this time for?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we spent the first couple of weeks when we had the early shutdowns in New York, California out here. There's survival mode. We're trying to help our business owners survive, and some of them are not going to 100%. And that's going to happen throughout the industry. We are trying to figure out how they do well right now. So not just survive business wise, financially, but then how do they do a good job? And then the conversation, what's next? How do we evolve going forward?
Yeah, definitely. Well, those are tough conversations, but certainly necessary. Is there anyone else here in this group that are operating in a private business type scenario? Like, I know Jarrett and Eric, you guys can comment a bit, and then we'll get on to what Keenan Robinson and Mike Hurst are doing on the Olympic side and getting ready for those athletes. But Eric, do you have anything to add? Has anything changed in terms of how you're preparing for getting beyond this?
Yeah, I think the conversation for us has shifted to like what's going to happen day one when the doors open, right? Like, so I operate a relatively small physio clinic, and we have like probably 4 clients in our space any one time, typically, and it's not a big space, and we share a wider facility with doctors and surgeons, and on any given day, like, our waiting room is packed, like sometimes standing room only, right? And I can't see anyone now, at least not day one, stepping inside our facility, looking around at what it would have looked like and feeling comfortable, right? So, from that like experience perspective and sort of meeting the market where it likely is going to be, we're trying to figure out how to adapt what we do. And I think a lot of it on the physio end is going to be telehealth. It's interesting. We connect with clients from all over BC regularly, and then oftentimes they're seeing clinicians elsewhere. And now, when we're sort of connecting with them over the last 3 weeks here, we're starting to work with them way more intimately than we would normally. And so that I think is likely to continue, which will be like Rob's saying, sort of introducing new product lines and whatnot. So trying to figure out the best way to do that. But I do think there'll be, a period of time, if not forever for us, where we'll have to significantly consider what the space looks like in terms of how many people, how close they are, how comfortable they feel being there, especially from a physio and rehab end. So yeah, again, like people are kind of saying, no hard and fast answers right now, but there's definitely be something different.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not going to look the same. Jarrett, you work in both healthcare and you do some training with people in groups. Like, how are you changing, or how are you planning on changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, this is going to accelerate something that I was sort of inevitably wanting to do anyway. Based on our past conversations, I just wasn't, I don't know, I didn't feel like I wanted to practice much longer, at least in that sort of clinic setting, one-on-one, kind of going from room to room. And the reason I kind of had the studio space in downtown Victoria was it gave me that sort of different outlet. I like the community, working out with, to build that up and still get to work on the other side. And the reason I did it initially was because as I made the transition from Toronto to out west, I just found the clientele was a little bit different. So I wanted to keep more of a movement type culture. So, and as you guys were talking, I'm like, I've got the space downtown. I just moved into a new house. So it's like I have rent, and I'm like, okay, do I want to keep floating the rent in the studio space downtown? And I'm like, okay, how long do I want to do this for? And then it's like, okay, well, once let's say July comes, and when everyone's sort of going back to normal, are there going to be people who want to come back into a space that's small and sort of cramped together? So there's, you kind of have to think of that as well. So that's sort of something new that I'm thinking about going, well, as I continue to maybe float the space downtown. But I just found out the other day that I'm technically a millennial, but I'm not very, I thought it was Generation Y, but I'm not very good with the, you know, we've had these conversations before where I kind of feel weird about Instagram and doing all this stuff. So it hasn't necessarily come naturally to me. But what I'm noticing now is, I mean, that's sort of the way to go. So starting having to put stuff on Instagram a little bit more, and doing more Zoom calls and reaching out to more people. And right now I'm just in the process today of getting things together, doing programs online and launching like Zoom stuff. And, you know, it's kind of fun. It's different because you don't have the one-on-one, but I mean, that's the way to go. And then when I look at the numbers, I'm like, well, shoot, you know, like it's actually not that bad if it works out the way it's supposed to work out. So there's definitely opportunity there. And I mean, I don't know what the climate's going to be like and how it's going to change, if people are going to, you know, have all this home equipment and want to use that more, or whether or not they just want to get back to the gym because they just want to be around people and be around their coach. So I think like there's a personality thing to that. I think there's going to be people that are dying to get back in and be around people and work out, who are a little bit more loose on maybe the, you know, how they feel about getting infected and whatnot. And other people are going to be on the other end where they're like, I'm going to wait this out for the year. So right now it's basically, I'm in a waiting period to sort of see what's going on, because that's for the telehealth stuff. Like I've sort of taken a look at it, and to be honest, I don't have any interest in it. So I'm going to start doing some more live Zoom stuff, see if I can float it. But the next step for me is going, okay, well, how long is this going to go on for, and can I afford to keep going? So there's a lot of variables, and right now it's like it's really a day-to-day thing. But right now I'm optimistic at the end result is going to be adaptation and change, hopefully for me for the better. And I'm confident in that, as long as you can sort of weather the storm going through. And yeah, I know in my profession as a chiropractor, I've been getting calls every day, and I stopped answering calls from colleagues, because I think, you know, usually people are high performers and high achievers, and now they're not doing anything. They feel helpless. So the only sort of mode of, like, they're just releasing energy by venting and bitching. So everyone wants to call each other and bitch about it. It was like, you know what, I saw a meme the other day where people are sitting at the start line of a race squabbling, and someone's got a broken leg and he just keeps going. So I think like it's just time to adapt and move forward and start sort of day by day and take some stuff online.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what
a
I'm getting out of
good
it.
point. Diversification, right? Just like your economic portfolio. And I know, like, I have stuff on Instagram, and I have to, like, after I shoot something, I have to go take a shower because I just, you know, can't stand myself. But certainly it's something that everybody has to get out of their sort of comfort zone and try different things. Like I'll get Ryan Banta on. My wife's a teacher, so she's having all these meetings with other teachers, and some of them don't even know how to send an email, and let alone do video conferencing or convert their curriculum to, you know, a digital format, or even making it interesting. Like one of my son's teachers sent an email out to all the parents and all the kids, and it was like 3 pages long. I'm like, oh my God, simplify. Like, you're an idiot. Come on, nobody's going to read your email. So I think, you know, tailoring your content to an audience to get more traction is pretty important, regardless of what medium it is. Ryan, do you have anything on that, on the education side even?
Yeah, so educationally, one of the problems is what you just touched on, is this idea of our administrators sending us out these copious notes and long-winded things, and it's like, I feel dumber after reading this because I don't understand exactly what you're trying to get through the legal jargon and the expectations and what are we supposed to do. So I've actually sat in on a number of conference calls with my administrative team and my faculty members within my department, and it's just kind of constantly the unknown, I think, is the biggest problem when it comes to this. So they're trying to set the stage for all of these possibilities, when it would be better to narrow it down to, okay, these are the 5 things we want done. These are the 5 things I want done for your kid. And I think people are afraid that if I provide this resource and a kid doesn't have the ability to get on the internet or can't get on YouTube, well, now I've got to provide 6 other activities that fit what I wanted to accomplish, but don't fit the easiest route. And you know how this is with students, more so than athletes. the students will be like, oh, I couldn't do the homework because my printer broke down, so I can't print this page out. I don't have a account on this thing called Nearpod, so can I turn it in a different way? How do you grade things? So for me, I've got homework assignments, and the kids, they're going to naturally want to copy each other's work and do stuff that they've always done. And it's much easier to do because they have to do it all digitally, which means a lot of cutting and pasting. So my workaround with that was, well, let's get you to actually answer these questions verbally, and you have to record yourself and you have to send them in, and that way it cuts down on the cheating, so that if I'm getting the exact same answer from my students, I know that there's a problem, because verbally they should not be giving me the same answer to an open-ended free response question. And then we've been told all this work that we're doing is only to be worth 5% of their grade. And so I'm like, well, now I'm doing hours and hours of work for a kid who is not going to drop more than 5%. So if they've got a 85% or an 87%, they're like, I'm still getting a B no matter what I do. I could do none of this. And our governor just recently, last night, finally declared a statewide stay-at-home, shelter-at-home order. And we've actually, in Missouri, been doing a lot better than most states when it comes to the pandemic. And the reason why is that our city governments and our county governments made that decision early and said, we're going to shut down schools, we're going to shut down the communities, only essential travel, those types of things. So it's a weird spot to be in as an educator, especially when we were off on spring break when this whole process went down. And so we weren't able to do training. We weren't able to get, access to computers to every kid and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see, since the governor took so long to do the shelter in place, we were kind of expecting him last night to say school is done as well, like they've done in Michigan and Ohio and Kansas, and Indiana's pretty much in the same spot. Illinois is in the same spot. So like, we're surrounded by all these states making these choices, and we've not made that. Now, personally for me, okay, you give me a 0.5% hope that somehow I can get back to face-to-face school and then have some sort of track season, then you can tell me to keep doing this digital stuff that only counts 5%, because that's where my heart is in place. But the reality is that I was saying, once we flip the switch and say, hey, we're allowed to go back, what going back looks like is going to be very different, whether the reality of the danger of the pandemic is extreme as it seems to be, or the reality of the hysteria behind the panic is absolutely as extreme as it seems to be. We're not going to start right away with 35 kids in a 10 by 10 cell block classroom, because it just seems dangerous, and you don't want to be the person that ends up killing somebody who's immune compromised. So it'll be a very interesting situation when we look at going back. People are now pushing things out to June, July, November with different releases of things. And so anyway, it's been tough. It's been difficult in the regards of just not knowing where we're going. With like September 11th, it's like, okay, there's an enemy eventually that we're going to go fight and attack. With a virus, it's like, okay, what are we fighting? Where's it going to? Who's responsible? What's the response? What's valid? And how do we know when we turn the lights back on, the process of what that should look like? It isn't just flipping a switch. It's flipping like thousands of switches. And as an educator, we're trying to balance those two things, and it's been really tough.
Thanks, Ryan. With that unknown factor, if I'll get Keenan Robinson on, like if you have athletes and everybody's going, well, I don't know when we're going to go back. What's the value in me trying to maintain fitness now if we're not coming back till November? And, how do you manage all that with athletes who know that they've had the Olympics postponed, and what do they do, Keenan?
Yeah, well, I think so. A couple of things are starting to fall back into place, right? We now know that we are going to have the games, and they're almost a calendar year to the original date. So that helps out. Like piece number one, they are going to happen. Piece number two is the huge one that we're all been talking about. Is like when will the world open back up? And in particular, like the only part of the world that I really care about this Olympic year is the United States. When is it going to open up, and when are kids going to start being able to get back into facilities to train, most importantly, swimming. And I think one of the things that we're trying to champion as an organization, so as USA Swimming, is that it's going to be a state by state, geographical region by geographical region. So have patience, and we're not some sort of entity that can supersede the U.S. government and say like, okay, Florida's still shut down, but we're going to open back up. You have to open up this pool. And a couple of the things that we're trying to look at strategically is like, let's say that Colorado Springs, which is where the Olympic Training Center is, and so for everybody online, like that's where the Olympic Training Center is. That's where USA Swimming's headquarters, but we don't have any athletes that necessarily live here in Colorado Springs and train year round. We have traditionally people that come up a lot during the December, January when university is on break, and then in the late spring and in all summer when they come up for camps. Now we may be a more utilized facility, but we gotta understand there's other NGBs, and how are we gonna sit on the pecking order with the USOPC in terms of who can come in and who can't. And then on top of that, a layer of, if we do let them back in, how do we make this the most sanitized place in America? And there's really like, I mean, to think that we can screen and have access to ventilators for the most elite of health, as opposed to like the elderly, like we can't do that, not ethically at least. So I think that's kind of like the big picture. Now small picture is for those of them that were repeat Olympians or were trending in the right direction going into Tokyo this summer, I think a lot of them, like the silver lining that I'm trying to say to them is one, there's a ton of work. There's a lot of exercise money in the bank, and these are all just like small withdrawals as long as we're doing something. And the silver lining is we basically got to do a dress rehearsal. Like, could imagine, like we run the AFC and NFC playoffs, and then be like, oh, guess what? Like the Super Bowl's off. We're going to go through and we're going to replay the season out and award. We actually kind of have that luxury in that. So Worlds ended in early August, late July last year, and people went back to like, okay, what's our final micro macro cycle look like going into Tokyo? What went right, what went wrong? We can kind of go back and throw out the things that went wrong and apply those that went right. For the half a dozen or so athletes that I'm still programming for, I feel really, really good. I'd say 50 to 60% of them still have access to a weight room. A lot of them, because they're in one pocket, and one of the athletes in January just decided to buy a bunch of equipment to build in his garage, and so that they have the opportunity to go to that. But one of the things that we're championing from the elite level is to not stray too far off your plan from the GPP stuff. So the stuff that you do in the weight room, or in swimming they call it dry land, is stay off your phone, because people that are doing burpees on end because they're told that it's going to increase your lactate production and lactate tolerance. Well, you haven't done a pressing movement because of your shoulder quality in 2 years. Like, why would you start doing that now? Like, let's stick to the plan of your basic fundamental movement patterns, and then we'll make the modifications in terms of density. So although we don't have the load to put on your back, we may be doing squats, and we're just going to condense your work to rest ratio. And so that max strength stuff we'll probably lose. And I don't know about the power, because if you truly understand power, like you can program in a 5x5, 6x6 area, some jumps and some med ball throwdowns. So I think that's one thing. And then from like the bigger picture, so the other 400,000 registered members in USA Swimming, so the little kids, the age groupers, and the high schoolers, and then the non-elite universities, is what type of services are we providing for them so that the kids are still staying engaged, and whenever we do open up, like we don't lose swimmers at the youngest age, because we need to kind of replenish always. So that's in a nutshell kind of what we're trying to do. But we need America to open back up to have the concrete plan.
Yeah, like as far as alternatives, you were on a text with me back and forth. You're like, people are running, but we're worried about the fact they're not prepared to run long distances to get the same sort of energy cost. And are there other alternatives? Like I always saw somebody, they had one of those like inflatable pools, and they had somebody tethered there swimming in that. And how about open water swimming? Have you come up with anything?
Yeah, I think in terms of the swimming part, and this is great. Like it just came out this morning on social media, is Bob Bowman, who you guys, like, he coached Michael Phelps and Allison Schmidt and Chase. I mean, he's coached a lot of other swimmers other than Michael to the highest level. Is he made a great point, and that's for like their elite level athletes, and I think irrespective of what their discipline is, but he used swimming as like their feel for their water. They're not going to lose that. There's a reason why they got to the elite level. They just better feel for the water. So that's not gonna be lost. It's gonna take a little while to knock the rust off, but so then you look at like your major energy systems, and so people are like, I just, like I was talking to you, Darren, like, oh, I just went for the first run ever. It was a 5-mile run. I haven't run in 3 years. And I was like, all right, well, now we're going to have stress fractures and tendinopathies. Or you see them like doing hill sprints, and like swimmers, for the most part, don't have any sort of running mechanics whatsoever. And there's not like a real logical like progression up to starting to do the hill sprints. But I think, if they kind of looked at it and started working with their coach, okay, what type of energy system, what type of quality do we need to maintain? And then go from there. I would say like manage your aerobic system for the most part, because I think that's the safest, right? And most swimmers understand like by heartbeat, like the different energy zones, right? Like pink, white, pink, red, blue. And so I would say like start if you can by cycling. And it's interesting. I haven't heard like read on social media, and you haven't talked about like even like you're just trying to get this for what most of the next 6 months, we hope. Like, is Walmart all out of bikes? Like, I don't care if you get the best quality bike, just something that you can ride on, because I think you run less of a risk for like the tendinopathies. You can easily do your social distancing. You just pedal fast away from the people walking down the other side of the sidewalk. If that's not an option, think about, the walking and like jogging and using your heart rate as the barometer. And one thing that we've seen, especially when we've been trying to do cardiac testing on these athletes with cardiac issues, is like they're so efficient at their heart, but inefficient at running, that like it's tough to get them swimming. And then I would start to go down to like the erg machines, just because of the second most pathology that we treat is low back issues, and none of them really know how to row. So we're just going to increase spines that are already active but dormant in this population. And then, maybe the ellipticals and stuff like that. But yeah, I've seen some people. I saw a kid, like he took like a 2x4 and put it on his deck and then hooked up buckets off of his deck, and he was kind of pulling like this. Like, it's pretty creative, but I've always said like, don't do it so much that it screws up your inherent like motor memory of your stroke mechanics.
Yeah, no, people are hoarding exercise equipment. A buddy of mine was at a fitness store, and he said people were hoarding 45-pound plates. And I'm like, we're probably going to see a whole bunch of deaths by asphyxiation in the bench press home gym, right? Like, like we'll see a whole rash of those. It's so nuts, right? Mike Hurst, I want you to jump on and just sort of bridge what Keenan said about, the athletic preparation in terms of the Olympics and the next season, and how you're dealing with that and keeping people rolling, but keeping them safe. Looking forward.
Sorry.
No, yeah, just sort of looking forward, and like, what are you preparing them for?
I just wanted to say I thought Keenan's contribution was outstanding there. And the other thing that occurred to me when Rob was talking about rehab was all unnecessary or optional surgery has been frozen. And I think as soon as this whole shitstorm is lifted, you're going to have a lot of optional surgeries returning, and I think physiotherapy clinics will be overwhelmed by it. I think you probably need to be ready for that. I won't say it'll happen overnight, but all these optional surgeries, and so there's that. From a preparation point of view, I think that this whole scenario has thrown into light how people design their programs, and what's the best way to excuse me, what's the best way to get through the problems of laying an aerobic base, if you like, and then working towards speed. And I think people, it depends where you live, but some people are going to emerge out of this with very, very truncated seasons. And so there's a challenge there as well, albeit the Olympics is now going to be more than 12 months away. So that's a good thing. And my solution to it, as has been the case for a long time now, is to revert to a concurrent type of a development program with very small cycles. Even, the longest cycle that I have would be 6 weeks, and that's broken into 2.5 weeks of strength and endurance, 2.5 weeks of speed and power, and cycling down to 3-day loops once you get into a competition preparation phase. It's a bit more complex than that, but I just think that a lot of people might want to review their program and see if that kind of philosophy, if they're not already doing something like that, that might be an option for them to contemplate at least. In terms of preparation, ongoing at the moment, in Australia, unless you're involved in a winter sport, a lot of people are on a break now. Certainly in track and field they are. And when they come back, they all, at least my group, all have a rough template to work off. And when you're restricted to no more than 2 people at a time outdoors, group training sessions are going to be very, very challenging, and if not impossible. So people are going to have to go on their own cognizance and try to do it the best they can under the circumstances. One thing I heard this morning on the radio was that the National Rugby League is looking at resuming competition here in June. So, I mean, we've had 30 deaths nationally. So compared to New York, it's a drop in the bucket, and maybe the measures that were instigated or implemented really pretty early of reducing contact and distancing, social distancing, they are working, and the curve does appear to be flattening. However, we're coming into winter, so maybe the curve has just been retarded temporarily, and we're going to get whacked before we get better.
Yeah, like that's interesting. You said you're moving into winter. I'd be curious to see how that changes, if at all, and hopefully you guys can flatten that curve before you get to that point.
Exactly. So, but I think most people, the biggest thing for most people will be psychological, just dealing with the isolation up to a point. And, you cannot travel interstate. Some people are trying to get back to New South Wales, which is the state in which Sydney is the capital city, and they just can't. They're just locked out. Or they've got to spend 2 weeks in some kind of quarantine zone. And so that's tricky. Most other people who are still working, I'm retired, but most people who are still working, a lot of people are just working from home, and that'll have implications moving forward for when this hailstorm passes. It might be a good thing for them to keep doing that.
Yeah, that's certainly interesting to see if people do continue to do the distance coaching and advising people moving on. Maybe they figure that, hey, this has worked pretty good. For the people working in university settings like Devin, has there been any messaging to you from the universities, or what are we looking for? Where are we going to try to resume getting back to normal? Like, is it like July, August? Has anybody sent you anything where you're like, okay,
No, really, they haven't give us any information yet. One thing we are hearing is that as certain states hit their peak and their numbers start to fall, here in Vermilion, South Dakota, we're not projected to hit our peak in later July. So if they are thinking about having fall sports, how is that going to look with certain states hitting their peaks at different times and not being able to train is kind of an interesting thing. But currently, right now, we're just sending out. I mentioned Team Builder last time around here. We were successful with that and sending out our workouts and kind of just playing it by ear. But from right now, I don't think there's going to be a lot of fall sports going on, especially having fans at them. And if there's no fans there, can the universities afford to fund these sports without fans being there? So currently, we're just kind of waiting it out.
Yeah, I'm sure there's football programs just kind of shaking right now. Like, they can't have off-season work, they can't have training camp, and then when's the cutoff before you say like, hey, we're just not going to run that program?
Exactly. It becomes dangerous at that point, throwing guys into a contact sport quickly without any off-season training, without any load on their body. Because again, everybody's got body weight workouts right now. So
Yeah. Let's see if those body weight workouts help. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of pro teams I've been talking to, and they're still voicing this idea that, hey, we can still get our playoffs in July, August, or August, September, and then we resume the next season in a little bit later. So they're still holding out this hope and preparing for that, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know if that's safe to think that way or plan that way, but anybody have any thoughts on if you're working in that environment, how are you going to manage that? Like the Olympics model is interesting because you have a year, you have more than a year. Awesome. So that's a lot of time to kind of digest and gear things down and have time to ramp things back up. But if you're thinking you're in the NBA or you're in the NHL and we got to get things back up, we're going to have like a 2-week training camp and then get our postseason done in July, August. Is that safe, Rob?
You do. I think I just want to say a couple things before I get to that. I mean, for Mike Hurst, I think going into winter, I think what you should prepare for as an opinion, what they say about opinions, is that how you're going to segregate influenza from coronavirus with your athletes, because you may have athletes that have the flu and not the coronavirus, but they're going to run fevers, they're not going to feel well. And so, is there certain testing, is there certain things you could discuss with physicians or whatever to segregate those diagnoses to keep the, hecticness and panic down. So since you're going into a winter season, I'm going to assume, what they say about assume, that influenza is on its way as well. So you may have a double punch there. And I would do everything you could to figure out how you could possibly address that so that to keep your athletes calm. So the other thing is that, the other gentleman spoke about, I put it up there, if anybody's having problem with rents, landlords have been very, very cooperative with foregoing rents for 3 or 4 months at a time, understanding that if they lose you as a client, if you go out of business, there's not someone that's going to sign the lease the next day. Probably more than an extended period of time of 3 or 4 months that they could have rents. And so they're very negotiable to put an extra 3 or 4 months on the back end of your current lease, maybe pay interest on those 3 or 4 months, but there's a way to work it out so that you can have financial solvency and string out the finances available to you. So if you're in a private business, consider that. Okay, now that I blabbered a little bit, Derek.
Well, that's but that's interesting because like there's certainly like everybody's talking about like establishing community and Ken talked about it and certainly on that end as a landlord, like they're talking about restaurants here, like 30% of them are going to be out of business, right? At least. And isn't there a need for like to come together as a community and go because who's going to take up those spots, right?
Well, here's what's going to happen. And my situation is very different from a lot of other people's situations. Okay, so we have 185 clinics in 5 states, and our clinics aren't in really remote areas. We're in New York City, we're in New Jersey, we're in fairly heavily populated areas. So our clinics in regards to there is going to be an overflow. I do believe that, which was a concern someone mentioned before. And I'm terrible with names, so forgive me if I don't remember your name. But and so we have the opportunity to say, well, this clinic is full, but if you go down the road a mile, we have another clinic, and we can disperse the overflow. But going with that same philosophy, unfortunately, as Ken said before, there are going to be some facilities that don't make it. You can look at that as opportunity as well. So is there going to be a built-out facility in your particular occupation that you can just turnkey into and pick it up as a cheap rent for either the establishment of a business or the overflow of your business? So the gentleman's a physio in Canada that works in a facility where there's orthopedic surgeons. Well, if those surgeons get real busy and there's substantial overflow, I wouldn't suggest you do this on day one because you don't want to make sure it's not a flash in the pan. But there's going to be plenty of opportunity to find a physical therapy facility, probably in the neighboring area, that's turnkey, that the physicians can sign a lease, possibly maybe there's an owner of a physical therapy business, a gym, a restaurant, whatever it is, that's on destitute, that would be a low percentage partner and already has a trained staff with a turnkey facility for a business extension opportunity for you. So a lot of things are going to evolve. Like I said, this is a crisis, but a lot of things are going to evolve as we come out the back end. Because I do think there's going to be a rebound, as I stated before, whether it's athletes, restaurants, physical therapy facilities, gyms, etc. The thing I'm curious about at the smaller colleges here in the United States, Division 2 or 3, because this came up as well. So you're a Division I school, all right? And you're in the Power 5 conference. Does the TV contract carry you financially, even though there's 0 people in the stands if they decide to play games, okay? What's going on now with institutions is the stock market is crashing, so to speak. Well, I shouldn't say crashing, but it's probably down almost 30%. And so that means your return on the college endowment fund is down 30%. Have the colleges reimbursed for room and board for the people they've had to send home. So that's finances that they thought they were going to have that they had to pay out unexpectedly in the budget. And now you're a small school, Division 3 school, Division 2 school, that doesn't have those contracts, that doesn't have the external revenues coming in. So it's a good question. Endowments are down. They had to pay out money to students that they sent home. Will there be fall seasons at the smallest schools? And that's where I'm really curious. What's going to happen to those athletes? I think the big schools with the TV contracts may be able to survive just based on that TV revenue, right? Because they would televise the games anyway. And you still have advertising income, et cetera. So.
And you have some athletes coming back because they've been given another year of eligibility. So you have all those extra scholarships and blah, blah, blah. It just
Well,
goes
that's a financial strain too, though, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You have more athletes, more financial commitments. So you see, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'll get Ken to jump in again and get his thoughts on that. But I wanted Franz Schneidman to jump in because you had mentioned something in the chat. How are you managing things from the rent, from the people who are leasing your space? Like, is that manageable? And how are you preparing for that?
Yeah, it's been kind of an interesting road because overnight we had to shut down. So I have renters that pay me rent, and they're out of business right now. So I'm definitely talking to my landlord, just trying to figure out what to do. I'm okay personally because I have my clients that went online. So I immediately made a tactical pivot to online, and that's been awesome. I actually like it a lot. But yeah, it lets you know really quickly how fragile your business model is when something like this happens, which is, it's not just me, it's happening to everybody. So, but I mean, I'm optimistic that my landlord will definitely work with me. And
thanks, Franz. Thank you for that. We got most of that. Thank you. Okay. We got most of that. Sorry. Ken, did you want to jump back in and talk about what Rob said in terms of opportunities? Like,
No, I think it's big.
Can you hear me here?
Yeah,
Derek,
I mean, I
can
think
you hear me?
Rob was making
Okay.
some really important points.
Okay. Thank you. That's
Kind of
right.
on multiple levels. Like you said, there's going to be failures. I'll tell you, on the rent side, we've seen some landlords. Some of our places are landlords. They're flowing up to their landlords. Some are great. They're willing to work. They're willing to establish things. It depends a lot on how solid that business has been in the past. If they've been a solid business, it's a lot easier. If they were on shaky ground, not so much. If we had people that never had a relationship with their landlords, way harder. I'll tell you, one of the big takeaways from all this is, did you already do the work and have relationships with your clients, with your vendors, with your staff, with your landlords? It just reinforces it's about relationships. In terms of opportunity, yeah, there's places that are going to go under. We expect some of our places are going to fail. There's going to be others in the industry on the PT side, on the fitness side, on the sports performance side, that are going to fail. And this is going to be, from my opinion and people I'm talking to, this is like any other recession, and God willing, not a depression. But those that are in a strong financial position will consolidate. They will find opportunity. And so obviously, if you're in the financial position, you can be out looking. But I think even beyond the financial position, it's opportunity to evolve. It's definitely opportunity for you to find those relationships with other small businesses, if it works for your business model and your setup, to create new partnerships. Everybody's going to have to step back, and there's going to be opportunities. So if you have the relationships, you got a good starting point. And if not, you should be thinking and talking to people. Who are the people that have values you like, who might be struggling financially? And there be some people that have great stuff that you can become involved with. And yeah, there's going to be, like Rob said, there's going to be literally businesses that close down, that have a market that needs to be served, that have a facility. There's going to be opportunities.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great analogy, Ken, for even like you talk about the business side, Rob talks about it, but even just relationships with athletes and clients moving forward. Keenan, you want to kind of finish off here with us, and like what parallels do you draw? You hear about these guys running businesses and having this communication and having this community. Do you find it's essentially the same thing for you working with athletes?
Yeah, one of the things that we've done, so from an organizational perspective, is our national team director, Lindsay Mantenko. The great thing about her being our national team director, beyond her husband being a Canadian, for all you Canadians, is that she was a two-time Olympian herself. And so I think she understands what these athletes are going through in terms of never experiencing it herself, but she knows, like, man, imagine something that you've worked your entire life for, or imagine being able to go to your second games, or for some their fourth games, and it just kind of being taken away temporarily, and the emotional stress that's going on. So she set up every Friday just a half hour, hour long Zoom conference like this for everybody on the national team. And so of the 120 some odd people we had, like, on the first two, we had 80 some get on, just so they can kind of talk through the emotional side of what they're going through. I think physically, the most elite will realize, like, we'll be okay. Like, we're not trying to play catch up, but emotionally, like, some of them, the payoff of being on TV for 8 straight days and doing something that at a very, very high level, that payoff is going to be huge. And okay, how do I make sure that I still sit in the same position? Contract, like suit contracts and things like that. So I think bringing the community together like that has just been awesome on her part. So hats off to her. From my own individual perspective, like the 12 or 13 kids that I stay in contact with, it's just like making sure you take your coach hat off from saying, like, hey, I use Train Heroic as my remote fitness app, and I don't say, like, hey, I noticed that you didn't get on to record your workout today. Like that life is, I'm not like that anymore. I figure, like, if you want to be an Olympian, and like, you're not going just to get the Nike swag and the Ralph Lauren swag. You're going to the podium, right? So, like, if they're not showing up, like, long before this COVID thing, like, that's on them. Like, they know what the consequences are. But now it's like, if you don't see them doing anything from, multiple days, my check-in is with them is, like, emotionally, are you guys okay? Like, are you dealing with this? Because at least in our sport, and I think with most Olympic sports, not like basketball, like, cause our American basketball team, right? Like they just show up and win, but like most of them have this routine, right? Where at 6 a.m. I get up and train, and then 9:30 I always eat my second breakfast, etc. Like routine has been thrown off. And so the emotional impact that can have on them, where they're like, all right, what do I do now? Is that's how you kind of make sure that they're not going dark, and they're not dealing with something from a psychological standpoint, not like a performance psychology, but from a true depression, anxiety, isolation type thing. So just making sure that like they know, like, hey, we're here for you. Like if you just need to vent, if you need to just say like, I'm sick of your BS, like home workout, that's cool. Like we'll find a way to get around it. But the community part, that was one of the big things that I wrote down early on in this conversation, was community and connection. And although we know that we're doing it intuitively, is how we're making sure that, like, at least personally, how am I gonna, my checklist, my daily and weekly checklist, are we creating some form of community and some sort of connection?
Yeah, a very, very important point from all of this. And I want to just kind of pose a question to everybody here. And if you want to jump in, please jump in and just contribute. I like calling on people, but I don't know if people are always comfortable. Like, hey, oh shit, he mentioned my name, just like when I was in math class in grade 8. Like, oh shit, I wasn't ready, I wasn't listening. But this idea of, like, Jarrett talked a bit about it, like getting outside of yourself and making that connection and going above and beyond to whether make yourself visible or establish a connection with your athlete, your fellow coaches, your employees. Like, are people going to start doing that? Are you going to get outside, get into an uncomfortable zone and start making those connections? Does anybody have any comments on that and how they're going to conduct themselves moving forward? Anyone? Starting now. Adrian, jump in.
Excuse me. Guys, I literally just left a track. Thankfully, there's a track that's right near me I could walk to that nobody's there. And I mean, of course, kids are going to be kids. I happen to be leaving, and it was a bunch of kids in the middle playing flag football. I'm like, what are you guys doing? You should be shut down. Shouldn't you be at home doing nothing? Like, well, my mom said, go live your life, but don't get into a group. Guys, you're in a group of 20. What are you doing? But it was funny, in the same breath, they all said, oh, wait, you're the coach that coaching Olympic trials, right? Yeah. Can you train me later? Oh, shit. But as I was leaving, there was a gentleman, he owns a dojo right up the road. He happened to be out there, like actual real samurai swords. And I'm like, I have to see it because, yeah, I mean, he was swinging it like for real. I'm like, wow. And so I stopped him because, I mean, that's my sort of hobby is martial arts. And he's like, hey, when this is all said and done, come up and come check us out. I've met him. I've got like the NFL guys. They're all calling because my buddy John Vickers, who's down in about an hour away from me, he says, hey, I've got about 20 NFL guys that want some real speed work. They're ready to go. And I think I typed earlier that once it's all said and done, I'm going to be busy as heck because, like, Derek, I think you said it before too, that we've met so many people just from, I'm at my kitchen table. And I've never met so many people sitting at my kitchen table or my couch in my life. And I've done nothing. So.
Great. Well, just, that whole sword social distancing thing is pretty interesting, Nikos. Anybody else gonna step outside of themselves and really change how they communicate and do business? And even if you work in a university setting, or Jarrett, you got something to say?
Yeah, like I think I started touching on it before, sort of getting out and getting over yourself of putting content out on social media. Like, you do a great job, and I think it's great because, like, try to emulate that because it's very authentic. Versus right now, everybody and their mother is putting up fitness stuff, and it's like, how do you sift through the bullshit and find out like who's good and who's doing quality stuff when everyone's putting up whatever workout? And I'm like, come on, am I guilty of that? I can't put that. I don't want to contribute to this, but I think trying to put out good content and separate yourself from the people who are just like, I don't know, like there's people like, hey guys, I'm cooking dinner and doing this. Like, I'm like, nobody cares. Stop. Like, you know what I mean? Like, put out good content. How can you educate and separate yourself? Like, so I'm going to move all my stuff online and people are going to pay versus, and I know there's tons of stuff. Like one of my friends was like, well, There's so many free things outside. It's like, all right, well, people want to take free stuff or get quality stuff online. And I think that's just sort of the way it's moving too, even from like for me as a physical therapist, you touch people, you know, like, and I sit there, my girlfriend's a chiropractor as well, and I listen to her in the other room doing telehealth. And it's like, what do you do? Like the easy fix sometimes is to get your hands on someone and do something. You're trying to coach them through. And initially I was going to do it, but I just have zero interest in doing that. I'd rather do like, I'm keen on doing the rehab side, but I think there's an opportunity to just educate, put yourself out. You can still do some one-on-one stuff, but, and I think that's just really the way things are going. And I know I was kind of behind the times. So this is my chance to go, okay, let's put stuff online, because that's the opportunity to build and grow. And if you want to put a course out, you know, you've got a captive audience. So that's sort of the takeaway for me is just getting over yourself and building up followers and having a bigger reach.
Yeah, like we all have time, and you know, I'll get Nikos to respond here, and then I'll get Ryan. But Nikos, like I've been pushing you, like, hey, get out of your comfort zone and start doing stuff. And hey, this is the perfect time. It's not like you can go walk around in Greektown and talk to people. So,
no,
are you doing that?
Derek's been on my case for years to get out of my comfort zone. My biggest problem with my comfort zone is the fact that my technique is a specialist technique, so it's a lot of hands-on stuff. So when I'm working with patients, I don't know if Rob, you can relate to this, that you actually get a tactile feeling as to how the body has changed and how it's compensated. So to be able to take what I do and then try to do an online thing. The only thing I know that I can do online is teach people how to stretch properly from my research that I've done with regards to stretching intensity, inflammation, and inflammatory response. That's not a problem about showing people how to stretch properly and putting them in the proper positions and when to stretch. But my issue is, how can I take these and replicate them online is very, very difficult, because you know that there are subtle changes when you're working with a patient. So the only thing I can think of from an online stuff is, I'm writing a course right now for a university on recovery, regeneration, adaptation. The only thing I can think of is actually giving the students the papers to read, and then the PowerPoint as the lecture, and then do a Zoom conference thing is the only thing I can think of. But to actually teach a student the micro-stretching technique.
Get over yourself and do it, man. I got 18, 19 people here as witnesses. Like, get the fuck over yourself. Do it.
Yeah, but how are you going to, Rob, okay. Rob, like, how are you going to take, okay, here is my office. How am I going to teach Derek? When I taught you.
Fucking do it.
Derek, when you worked with me for 6 months, you learned a lot from hands-on stuff. How am I going to do that?
Nikos,
figure it out.
Yo,
Nikos,
Rob.
you gotta play the hand that was dealt with you. All right, it's dealt to you. So when you go on this telehealth or you go on Zoom, whatever it is, just like Ken said before, right? You're maintaining communication and contact with your clientele, right? So what can we do as healthcare professionals, maybe on a video type? You could probably do partial evaluations. You could partially give them some exercises to do. You could.
True.
You're never going to be able to do hands-on until they've cleared to come back to the office. So play the hand that's been dealt with you and maintain contact with your clientele so that when they're ready to come back and the door opens, they will come back. And I mean, that would be my advice to you. And I'm telling you,
the one question I need to ask is that I'm at that point right now where I actually want to start teaching the technique as well. So I was gonna go meet up with Jordan in Montreal. There was some chiropractors here in the city here that are interested in learning the technique from me. And the issue is, how are you going to get out there to show without showing them is what my biggest problem.
Innovate. Find a way, man. Find a way. Okay. But you won't. Sitting in that room reading all those books ain't gonna help you, right? So figure it out. Like, shit. Sorry about that, Callie. Sorry about all the swearing, but I just got to get through to this guy. Ryan, Can you talk some sense into Nikos?
First of all, you should never be ashamed for accepting money for the work that you do, number one. Number two, the idea and the strategy is offering some sort of discount, rebate, something, and then they've got to do something for you, which is a financial commitment. The weirdest thing I've ever found is when I used to do personal training before I had my 2 kids and a wife, and I got to spend time with other human beings besides adolescent teenagers trying to get football scholarships. But at the end of the day, the kids that would pay me weekly didn't commit as much as the kids who paid up front. Brett Bartholomew talked about that a lot too. You should never feel ashamed for providing some sort of income for your skill set, and because you have value. If you don't show them that you have value, they're not going to make that financial commitment. And on top of that, they're less likely to make the commitment to do the thing that we're trying to get them to do. And all of us got involved in the things that we're trying to do to improve people, whether it's from health, performance, or a combination of the two, right? And so for us, we've got to figure out how to monetize what we do. Now, we don't need to be like certain people that we know that are out there trying to make money in almost an abusive way. But like for me, when I reached out to the 5,000 people that had followed me on Facebook, I would say it was probably 49 out of 50 who I reached out to who, number one, weren't offended that I said, hey, you checked out my book? You've been my friend on Facebook for like three years here. I was just wondering if you've got a chance to look at it. And only, again, 1 out of 50 would be like, you're annoying me, this is spam, bye. Most reasonable people who are already following you are willing to at least listen to you. And then by providing the idea that, hey, my skills, my knowledge, my situation has a monetary value, they're going to commit if they want to. And that conversation has to be done. When somebody follows me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, I always say, thank you for the follow. If they respond at all, I ask, hey, how did you come across my account? Then they give me that information, and I steer the conversation into a way that not only can I financially benefit, but that I can help them because they're reaching out and following me in the first place. So there's avenues in which, hey, maybe you do 3 or 4 videos for free, or you do 1 video for free a week. And then the other stuff's, I hate to say behind a paywall, but it's like, if you want the rest of this is where you got to go, and for you, I don't know if you have a flipping mannequin or anything like that in your house. I know that'd probably be interesting to show some stretch routines, but at least you can show them in part where you're wanting to manipulate the tissues, the connective tissues, the bones, the remodeling of the tissue or whatever. And I guarantee there'd be a ton of people very interested in seeing that and would pay money for that based on your reputation and knowledge. So anyway, I'm going to push it just like Derek.
This is for Nikos. There you go. There you go. There you go. Anybody else? Nikos, Keenan was asking, do you have a website where you can share some of this info, like anything? Like, here's your shot.
Yeah, we do have a website that we've worked on at www.microstretching.com. So, Derek filmed me in the summertime with Eric was there, Eric Marriott, Jordan was there, and I was doing some hands-on stuff with Chernesky, Hunter. So there is content on there right now as we speak. So
we just need more. Okay.
We just need more.
Well, and to jump off of that, I got to interrupt, but Jimson Lee put a free chapter on speedendurance.com for me. It had 6,000 downloads in a week. Now, I have not sold 6,000 books, but at least it gives you an idea of the interest. And then you got to figure out how you move those 6,000, vampires that want to, take all your workouts for free and get them to say, hey, the time you put in, the knowledge you have, the experience you have, the means in which to help me is worth it at whatever price point you feel comfortable with, and that just kind of, again, is this idea of, especially in the times that we're in right now, we have the digital platform. Everyone's forced to use the digital platform. There are ways to monetize it, and somebody who's actually going to help someone deserves to make money from it. So anyway.
Great. I figure that's a good enough amount of time for us to go over this. Is there anything else anybody else wants to add before we sign off? I thought this was very valuable, some great contributions, and yeah, again, we're going to meet up next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about, but certainly let's keep connecting and building this community. And thanks for everyone. Hopefully, I don't even know what day it is, but I think it is the weekend. So hopefully you guys enjoy your weekend. It just all blends together. So thanks again.
You, Derek.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate
Be
it.
safe.
Take care.
Thanks, Derek.
Bye-bye.